thank the gentlelady from Minnesota for pulling this together and for yielding. And Mr. Speaker, I'm listening to the presentation by the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks, about the rule of law and the application of the rule of law. And he concluded that segment with, "Thy liberty in law." And I look around this chamber and I see a doctor, a lawyer, a doctor of all species except Homo sapiens in the animal kingdom, a tax lawyer, and a lawyer and a judge who wanted to legislate, left the bench, and ran for Congress and got it right, Mr. Gohmert. Now, that might appear, Mr. Speaker, to the people that are watching in on C-SPAN that this is too hard for maybe some folks that don't fit those categories to understand. So I want to make the point that I stand here, I'm a ditch digger, and I understand it. It is not complicated. All you have to do is understand that this is a great country, and we have a role to play here, each one of us. And it is to defend, preserve, protect, and in the case of modern world, refurbish the pillars of American exceptionalism. And an essential pillar of American exceptionalism is, as Mr. Brooks articulated so well, the rule of law. You are not going to have liberty without law, the application of the law. And as one of the members of the Judiciary Committee said to some people that wanted amnesty, as surely as you're crying out for the non-application of the law today, you will be crying out for the full application of the law tomorrow in some other venue for some other reason. But some of these points that we need to think about, and I just want to list them because I think I've got an opportunity to pick up at the bottom of this hour and maybe add another 30 minutes to our discussion here. But there seems to be a belief in the Senate and some of the Republicans in the House, Mr. Speaker, there seems to be a belief that if we do business with the President on immigration, we can write laws that he will enforce. I remember one of the self-appointed leaders of the secret gang of 8, now 8 minus 1, said to us, you know, if we determine that we are not going to legalize the people that are here illegally, then we will never get the border secure. Well, really? Well, that means then that they've got to be talking to the President. And the President is saying, I'm not going to enforce the law unless you legalize these people here. And that's got to be the calculus that's taken place, that he's not going to enforce the law unless we legalize the people that are here. So I look at this and okay, the Gang of Eight's bill. I don't know what's all going to emerge here in the House. Nothing is a better answer. But over there on that side, it is perpetual and retroactive amnesty. Perpetual is this. It goes on forever. You could never enforce the rule of law again if you exempt people that came into the United States illegally or those that overstayed their visa. Here's the exception. That is, if they committed a felony, if they committed 3 of the correct mysterious misdemeanors that disqualifies them, then they apparently embarrass the administration enough that they would send them back to their home country. But other than that, other than those exceptions, a felony, 3 mysterious misdemeanors, everybody that came into America before December 31st, 2011 gets to stay, and they get legalized. Anybody that would come after that date or admit that they came in after that date, they don't get legalized immediately, but what they do get is the implicit promise that they'll be legalized eventually. And anybody that has been deported in the past for anything other than a felony or 3 mysterious misdemeanors, any of those people get an invitation in the bill that says, reapply, come on back. So it's perpetual and retroactive amnesty. That's what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, and that's one of the things that's got to be blocked. Now, the belief that the President would give his word and keep it, it's appalling to me to think that anyone would simply accept that statement on its face. We know that the President took his oath of office, the Constitution itself, and it says to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And what the President has done instead is executed the law when he didn't like it. I mean, death penalty to a law that he doesn't like, including immigration law. So we know here that our word is the only thing we have with each other. We give our word, we keep our word. It is the coin of the realm. And yet, they're willing to stake the destiny of the realm of the United States of America on the anticipation that the President will give and keep his word and enforce immigration laws when he's proven that he won't even keep his word on the law that bears his name, Obamacare. He said, no, I'm going to change it, even though the law specifically says it shall be implemented in the first month of 2014. Now he wants to add a year to that. So I suggest instead what they're doing is they're betting the future of America on the President's word, that he'll enforce laws that he may like if we send him to his desk. He might sign them anyway because he doesn't intend to enforce them. The coin of the realm is our word. So, and it says on our currency, in God we trust. Are they ready to place on our currency in Obama we trust? Because that's what's at stake here, Mr. Speaker. And there are a number of other topics that I would bring up. However, I notice that there is a focus here on bringing this thing around to a logical conclusion, and I believe I'll have another opportunity. So I would yield back to the gentlelady from Minnesota. I thank all the people that came here to speak, and hopefully we'll have another opportunity to take it up in a few minutes. Thank you.
I thank
you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to be recognized here on the floor of the House of Representatives, and I'm hopeful that we can carry on some of this dialogue that Mrs. Bachmann has led over the last hour. I wanted to make a point, and that point would be about we are a nation of immigrants. Yes, we are, and we're probably the nation, we're certainly the nation that has the most vitality that comes from immigrants. And it's one of those things that it's embodied in the Statue of Liberty. When you talk about Ellis Island and you look out across from Ellis Island to the Statue of Liberty, the image that's embodied within her is the image of American exceptionalism, the pillars of American exceptionalism. You see them all: freedom of speech, religion, the press, rule of law, that central pillar, and property rights. And you don't have to face it. You face a jury of your peers, but you don't have to face them twice. There's no double jeopardy. And states' rights, the list goes on and on. Free enterprise capitalism. It is a Judeo-Christian culture and society that founded this country. You take out anything that I've said, you pull that out from underneath, and the shining city on the hill crumbles. But when you look at the Statue of Liberty, the people that love liberty all over the world see that statue, and they find a way to come here because they realize that they can be the best they can be if they can just get to America. That's why we have in this country so much vigor and vitality. Not just the pillars of exceptionalism that I've listed, but also the vigor that comes with people who have dreams. And so they see the statue and they think, all right, now I've got a dream to come there, and if I can freely speak and worship and preserve the rule of law, I can operate in a free enterprise society, I can be inspired. You put that all together, it's a natural filter that goes across the world. It isn't because we screened all of them here. We screened a lot of them at Ellis Island. About 2% didn't make the grade. Even after they were screened in the old country, they came and landed at Ellis Island. They went through the filter, and about 2% got sent back to the old country. But we got the dreamers. It was almost all dreamers that got on the ship to come here, and so we didn't get just a cross-section of every civilization from, say, Norway to Germany to Ireland to Italy or wherever it might be. Name your country, anywhere in the world. We got the vigor of every civilization. We got some of the best and the most energy that came from any civilization to America. So when you couple that, you think of a giant petri dish with all of those rights there, and all of the freedoms and the pillars of exceptionalism that I listed, then you put the best people possible in that environment. It doesn't mean they're the smartest. It doesn't mean they're the richest. It doesn't mean they're the best educated, but it means they are the doers that take that combination of brains and ambition and education and instinct and know-how, and that's what built this great shining city on the hill, this America that we are. And we cannot let this be torn down. We cannot let them chisel away with their word processor jackhammers, their verbal jackhammers, or their legislative chicanery in order to produce something that undermines us. And I know one of the people that understands that very well is a gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Fleming, and I'd be so happy to yield to the gentleman from Louisiana.
Well, I thank my good friend from Iowa and for yielding and for his words. And I'd like to build a little bit upon what you were saying, and that is that everyone in this room speaking this evening opposes amnesty. We've already said that each and every one of us has opposed amnesty, but we all celebrate immigration. We come from immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants. My forefathers, going all the way back to the 1700s, were immigrants from Scotland. They farmed the land, and all the way up until my dad left the farm to go to World War II, they were all farmers. And I'm very proud of that fact. And I'm very proud that other people want to come to this country, and I celebrate that, and I want to encourage them to come as long as they come lawfully. We have a place. We have a place for migrant workers, for guest workers to come. We need them. They will do jobs that many Americans won't do, and it benefits them. It advantages their families back home, and they send that money back. It's a great working relationship, but it must be done legally. And then we have the high end, the STEM workers, those who come here with either with high degrees or learn high degrees here. They bring with them oftentimes their capital. They start businesses, they start companies, and we want to attract those and keep those. We don't want them taking back our innovations to other countries and then competing with us. We just simply ask that they come here legally, and we, of course, as members of Congress, we have a responsibility to make sure that we do what's in the best interest of the citizens who are here, whether they were born here or naturalized here. But I want to shift just slightly, and that is this. We've touched upon this. One of the biggest fears we have about the Senate amnesty bill, and there's no question about it, it's amnesty by any measure, by any metric, is we can't trust the president. We can't trust him. Whatever we pass into law, we know he's going to cherry pick. How do we know that? Well, look, Defense of Marriage Act. He refused to defend that to the courts. Appointees to the NLRB. He did that when, of course, the Senate was actually not in session, against the Constitution to do that. Obamacare. He's picking and chooses the parts of the law that he wants to implement. So I think we could create a long list here tonight of the fact that this president is doing something I have never seen a president do before. In a tripartite government, with its checks and balances, we have lost the balances. We have a president that picks and chooses the laws that he wants to obey and enforce. We have a head of the Department of Justice who does exactly the same, even to the point that Congress has held him in contempt. And so, with any lack of any better term, that makes him a ruler. He's not a president, he's a ruler. Because if he can just pass whatever laws that are going to be passed and then pick and choose the laws that he's going to enforce and that he's going to obey, then we no longer have the checks and balances that go along with the presidency. So with that, I'd be happy to yield back. Thank you.
To reclaim my time in thanking the gentleman.
Toward the president. Gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Personally, I like the president, and I will refrain from those kind of comments, although I'll continue to disagree with him on his approach to this. And I wanted to make a comment in response to the discussion here by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Yoho, and, well, Dr. Yoho and Dr. Fleming. Yes, we're a nation of immigrants. I've continually heard that testimony before the Immigration Subcommittee for over a decade now. And so one day I just had this thought that was a little bit off the wall. I just asked this question: can you name me a nation? Had these panel of experts in front of me. Name me a nation that is not a nation of immigrants. And the witness said, well, let's see, that would be, no, name me a people that is not a nation of immigrants. A nation that's not a nation of immigrants. And she said, well, that would be the Incas and the Aztecs. The Incas and the Aztecs are not immigrants. And I said, who, according to anthropologists, came across the Bering Sea about 12,000 years ago? Would you like to try again? And, of course, that was it for her. She didn't want to try again. And I've asked that question a number of times, and I've been challenged to do a little bit of research. I haven't found a nation that's not a nation of immigrants. Some will say Japan is about as indigenous a population as you can find, but even there are a couple of different definitions on where they come from. There's two distinct groups of the Japanese, and some of their roots go down to the Polynesian islands, they think, that they might have arrived there. Some of them might have arrived from Asia, and their language and even their appearance differs from the north to the south. I don't know that, but they do. And so if Japan isn't a nation of immigrants, if they did come at one time, you name your country around the world. We're all nations of immigrants. The history of the world has been about the migration of human population. And that doesn't mean that nations shouldn't exist or shouldn't have borders. Look back over the last couple hundred years and name for me an institution more successful than the nation state. The nation states emerged from the city-states, which emerged from the castles in the feudal era, where they had to build a castle and get inside the moat to defend themselves from the marauding hordes that traveled the countryside to rape and pillage. And so then the castles became the city-states joined together and became the nation-states, and the nation-states defended themselves against the other nation-states. Nations have borders, and you can't be a nation without a border, and you can't call it a border if you don't defend the border. So if people are willing to argue against the nation-state, that's true with the globalists. They argue against the nation state. They think they should be able to trade, buy, sell, trade, make gain, and move human population wherever it suits their economy. So I started to wonder about this. The nation state is a successful institution. There's nothing wrong with the border. You must have it. And it's biblical as well. When St. Paul gave his famous sermon on Mars Hill in Acts 17, he said, "And God made all nations on earth, and he decided when and where each nation would be. Well, this is the United States of America, a very blessed nation, a nation that was formed with this religious concept, driven also by a lot of other forces of manifest destiny. And this country was formed and shaped from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, from sea to shining sea, in the blink of an historical eye. How did that happen? How did it happen that we happen to have all of these rights that come from God? Not accidental. We are an extraordinary nation for a lot of exceptional reasons, and we've talked about those exceptional reasons. But nations should be proud of the nations that they are, and no nation could be more proud than the United States of America. We are the unchallenged greatest nation in the world, and we risk in a decline if some of the people in this Congress don't come back around to embrace the pillars of American exceptionalism. And so I asked myself, what is it? What is it that the people on my side of the aisle, but also across the country, what is in the Gang of Eight's bill that's good for America and Americans? Who has benefited when you look across the country? First, I looked at it and my first thought, well, nobody. Then I dug a little deeper on that. I'm going to be challenged if I say nobody in America has benefited by this. And so I produced the complete list. I think this is a complete list of the Americans that are benefited by the Gang of Eight's bill. First, the elitists. The elitists being those people that want to hire cheap labor to take care of their gardens and their lawns and clean their houses and their toilets and do those things that people say Americans won't do or don't want to do. So they want to be able to hire cheap labor to take care of themselves and maybe paint the gate in their gated community and oil the hinges for them and then lock the gate outside or however they might do that. Elitists benefit from cheap labor. And the next group of people that benefit are Democrat power brokers. Not the blue collars, not in the short term the unions, not the workers, but Democrat power brokers who have a long-term strategy, which isn't very far down the line, to capitalize politically on the massive votes that they would bring in if the Gang of Eight bill is passed. You don't have to ask Democrats what they think. It's very, very clear. They're political beneficiaries. If they're power brokers, they want this done. Elitists, Democrat power brokers. Third, employers of illegals, whatever their party might be. They want to be able to hire cheap labor, and they would say, well, if you legalize them, the cost of wages are going to go up. Well, they want to have a continual supply of cheap illegal labor coming in. That's why this is perpetual and retroactive amnesty. It doesn't stop the flow of illegal immigration. It just lets those that want to legalize themselves get right with the law. It gives amnesty to the illegal employers. They can't go back on them after the Gang of Eight's bill might become law. So that's the three groups of people that benefit from this, from the Gang of Eight's bill: elitists, Democrat power brokers, and employers of illegals. And by the way, go to any of those groups of people and ask them, do you want those folks to go back to where they are legal? Just challenge them. And I would tell you the elitists don't. They want their cheap labor to clean their toilets and cut their grass and take care of their gardens, their flower gardens for them. Democrat power brokers surely don't. And by the way, they understand this, that they have political power anyway, legal or illegal, because the census counts the people, not the citizens, for purposes of apportionment and reapportionment. So what that means is there are 9 to 11 congressional seats in America that would change hands politically if we counted citizens instead of people, because some of these districts are way overloaded with illegal populations. They're counted. Now, I didn't see how many votes it took for, well, I better not get personal with this. I'll just tell you it takes me 120,000 votes at least to get elected before we redistricted. And there are seats here that it only takes 40,000 to win. That's because there are a lot of illegals in the district that are counted. They have representation in this Congress. So who doesn't want them to go home? Just ask them. Do the elitists want them to go back to their home country? No. They're beneficiaries. Democrat power brokers? No. They're beneficiaries. Then what about employers of illegals? Certainly not. They're beneficiaries. They get a continuing supply of illegal labor, a labor that is going to be legalized, and then those folks that come in afterwards, that deadline, they're going to be legalized too. That's the three groups. Otherwise, there isn't anybody in America that's a beneficiary from this that I can come up with. The rest of the Americas are disadvantaged by this idea. If you have 2 jobs and 3 people that are qualified to do that work, then you've got at least somebody that can bid that work down. If there are only 2 people available for that job that meet the qualifications, they name their price. Well, multiply that out into the millions and see what happens with the no-skilled and the low-skilled workers. That's where you get double-digit unemployment, no and low-skilled. Why would you bring in more no and low-skilled people, especially those illiterate in their own language, to come in and do more of this work when you've got an overload there anyway? And
they receive over $30,000 in taxpayer-subsidized revenue benefits. Therefore, they are a net negative to the American Treasury of $20,000 a year. Now, why in any universe would you import people into the United States that cost us on average not just $20,000 one time, $20,000 every year? As a matter of fact, Robert Rector has said in his work that the average illegal immigrant costs the United States Treasury over the course of their lifetime about $1 million. Why would we do that? Why would we do that? Because we're robbing from our children. That's why it doesn't make sense. We're hurting the American middle class who are here legally. I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady from Minnesota and reclaiming. I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Comer.
Thank you. And I, too, want to follow up on something Dr. Fleming was referring to. This is the Senate bill is considered some great panacea. It's going to solve all the problems. We're finally going to get border security, we're told. Excuse me. But I can think of at least a couple of times when this president has said, if the Congress doesn't change the law, you know, I will. Basically, he said if they don't act by changing the law, then I'll act. And we've seen him do that. When he didn't like the law on immigration, he changed the law just by his own decree. We've seen with regard to even Obamacare, here his signature bill from his first administration. It's not going well. He wouldn't come ask Congress, it's not going well, so let's change the law. So he just gave, so shall it be, which is not reminiscent of normal presidential conduct. It's important that a president enforce the law, advocate for changes in the law, but under no circumstances is the president supposed to change the law to fit his own desires. I mean, you advocate, but the checks and balances, which are the real genius behind the Constitution, that do create gridlock, that create tensions between the different branches, are what keeps this place from becoming a monarchy. And this president, when he says, if Congress doesn't act, change the law, then I will take care of it. Well, we've seen that with gun control. He didn't like the fact that Congress was not changing the law when we were demanding that he enforce the laws that are there. All of these killers that have just been a plague on society, they violated plenty of laws, but this administration they may be the worst at enforcing the gun laws, and certainly this administration has really been wanting in the area of enforcing the gun laws, and instead they come around and say we want new gun laws. Well, that's not the way to do it. And I know there are Republicans say, look, it's important we get this off the table. Let's just get it off the table, so let's pass something, and that'll get off the table, and then we can get on to the other things. Well, I've already mentioned, I think the thing to do is say resolved. The House is not going to take up an immigration bill until the President, the executive branch, Homeland Security, secures the border. Woodrow Wilson, and I'm not a fan of his historically, but in 1916, when Americans were threatened by raids across the border and Americans killed, that president secured the border, pure and simple. He secured the border, and he didn't go running around demanding that a new immigration bill be passed and we give amnesty to people. But there was a great article that National Review had today from Fred Bauer, and he said, any argument that says the GOP should support such a measure to remove immigration as a political issue should be treated with immediate suspicion. Millions would be left as illegal immigrants under the Senate plan and most other legalization plans, and a million more illegal immigrants, according to the Congressional Budget Office, would arrive over the next 10 years. Many provisions of the Senate bill, from the long wait time for citizenship to the status of guest workers, provide plenty of opportunities for the left to demagogue this issue. Any changes to U.S. immigration law also change the future composition of the body politic. Immigration as a national policy question has not been, quote, off the table, unquote, since 1789. Don't expect the latest link of congressional sausage to change that. I think that's well said. This is not going to be off the table, and the way that we should deal with it responsibly is hold the administration accountable. You enforce the law, and then we'll get an immigration bill done very quickly after that. I know we will. All of my colleagues here know there are parts of the immigration law that need to be fixed. But until the border is secured, not closed, but secured, we're wasting our time talking about a comprehensive immigration bill, or even good bills like Trey Gowdy, other bills that people have had. We shouldn't even be talking about them. The administration secure the border, and then we can work these things out very quickly. It's like a huge flood in your basement. You run down and start with a mop while the water's still pouring in. You're making a mistake. You first stop the flood, and then you can clean up the problems after that. I yield back.
And in reclaiming my time and thanking the gentleman from Texas, I just think of Congressman Phil Gingrey, another doctor that engages in policy here, who once on this floor, probably at least once, said that when he's working the emergency room and a patient comes in on a gurney and there's blood pouring off the gurney, you don't just go get the mop and the bucket and start to mop up the floor. You stop the bleeding first, and let's stop the bleeding at the border. So I think, how hard is it to secure this border? Not that hard. With the resources that we have, we are spending today, this is a 2,000-mile border. It's not just a rounded number. I mean, it's right at 2,000 miles. And we're spending over $6.5 million a mile on the southern border each and every year. So I look at that and I think, what are the economics of this? This is one of the advantages of being a ditch digger, a construction guy, because I figure this stuff out on what it costs to build things. But we're building interstate highway through expensive Iowa cornfields for $4 million a mile. Buying the right-of-way, doing the engineering, the archaeological, environmental, the fencing, the seeding, the paving, the shouldering, and the painting. All of that gets done for $4 million a mile. And we're spending $6.5 million a mile to guard a long, barren desert that a lot of it doesn't even have a one barbed wire fence on it. It's just got a concrete pylon from horizon to horizon. $6.5+ million a mile. So think of that. What would it take to build a fence, a wall, and a fence if we can build interstate for $4 million a mile, and we're spending $6.5 million a mile to, I guess, say, interdict perhaps 25% of the people that try. Instead, we can build the fence, the wall, and the fence. We can secure the border, and we can do it with the resources that we have. We just have to want to. It's got to be about the rule of law. It's got to be secure the border first. It's got to be, and who's going to be the metric? Let it be the border state governors, the border state legislatures passing a resolution that the border is secure. Then let's have the balance of this conversation. Not unless it's like your teenager coming to you saying, Dad, I need the keys to the car. I know I've never mowed the lawn or carried out the garbage. I promise I will. Just let me have the car tonight. I'll be back tomorrow. Is he going to keep his word? He hasn't even fired up the lawnmower yet. He doesn't know where the gas is. He probably doesn't know where the mower is. Do the job first, and then come back to us and talk to us. But let's not destroy this rule of law, this essential pillar of American exceptionalism. Whatever it takes, we must block amnesty. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate your attention and all of the people that spoke here tonight for this hour and a half to preserve and protect the rule of law. And I would yield back the balance of my time.
Time has expired.